The jet's wheels screech against the tarmac at Los Angeles International Airport, late evening, early 1980s. Michael Jackson doesn't look out the window. He's staring at his right hand, thumb rubbing the edge of a black leather glove he hasn't put on yet. The destination isn't printed on the ticket anymore. It's already in his head. A quiet house in the Hollywood Hills. Stevie Wonder is waiting there. The glove is the object that gives the moment weight, not because it's worn, but because it isn't. Something about this meeting requires bare hands. The stakes are invisible but enormous. Creative control, spiritual direction, and the question of whether the biggest pop star on earth is about to be warned about a future he can't outrun. Days earlier, the world Michael Jackson lives in is rigid, rule-bound, and hostile beneath its glitter. Thriller-era meetings happen in windowless conference rooms at Epic Records, with contracts slid across polished tables and executives timing his silence. MTV still resists black artists in heavy rotation. Radio consultants talk about crossover like it's a surgical procedure. Michael responds by flying at night, recording until dawn, and calling mentors instead of lawyers. Stevie Wonder has always been one of those mentors. Not a peer chasing charts, but a figure who survived Motown politics, blindness, genius, and fame without surrendering his inner compass. According to people close to both men, Michael requested the meeting himself after a phone call ran longer than expected, the line going quiet when Stevie asked a question that didn't sound musical at all. The call reportedly happened after a late-night playback session in Westlake Studio A. Michael had just replayed a rough mix, fingers snapping once, then stopping. He asked for the lights down. In the control room, engineers watched him tilt his head, listening past the speakers, like he was trying to hear something behind the song. Afterward, he picked up the studio phone. Stevie Wonder's number wasn't on the wall. Michael knew it by memory. When Stevie answered, the conversation drifted from synth patches to pressure, from Quincy Jones to isolation. Then Stevie said something that accounts differ on, but the effect is consistent. He warned Michael about listening only to applause. There was a pause. Then Michael said he wanted to talk in person, not tomorrow, soon. The flight itself becomes part of the tension. Michael sits still as the cabin hums, flight attendant whispering his name like a secret. He's not traveling with an entourage, just one trusted aide. The glove stays folded in his bag. Outside, Los Angeles looks flat and endless, sodium lights like a grid. Stevie's house, according to visitors, is warm and cluttered with instruments, keyboards against walls, percussion stacked near the couch. When Michael arrives, Stevie doesn't stand. He turns his head, smiles, and says Michael's name like he's testing the room's acoustics. There's a piano nearby, lid half open. No one touches it. That's the first signal this isn't a jam session. They sit. The anchor of the scene is small, a cassette recorder on the table between them, red light off. Michael reaches toward it, then pulls his hand back. Stevie notices. He asks why the glove is still in the bag. Michael shrugs, says he didn't think he'd need it. Stevie replies gently that sometimes people hide inside symbols without knowing when they started. This is where the turn begins. The stakes sharpen. This isn't about a song, it's about who gets to define Michael Jackson's future, himself, the industry, or something darker that feeds on attention. In the days leading up to that night, pressure had been building. Tabloids had started running stories about Michael's eccentricities, tiny details magnified into pathology. Executives wanted more say in visuals, more spectacle. According to associates, Michael had begun asking odd questions during rehearsals, about trust, about being watched, about whether success could be too loud. Stevie Wonder, who had navigated fame without sight, represented a different way of seeing. That's why Michael flew. He wasn't chasing validation, he was seeking orientation. As the conversation stretches on in that quiet room, Stevie leans forward, fingers resting at the edge of the piano bench. He tells Michael that fame has a sound, and it's not music, it's noise. He warns that noise attracts people who don't love you, only what you reflect back at them. Michael listens, eyes down,
nodding once. The cassette recorder stays off. Outside, a car passes, headlights briefly sweeping the wall. The moment feels contained, but it isn't. Something is being set in motion. Stevie's voice lowers. He says there's a point where talent becomes a mirror for other people's hunger. He says some artists don't survive that moment intact. Michael finally looks up. He asks a question that insiders say changed the room. What do I do when they stop hearing the music? Stevie doesn't answer right away. He turns his head toward the piano, then back towards Michael. The air tightens. Whatever comes next will either steady Michael or push him toward a darker understanding of his own legend.
Stevie Wonder answers slowly, his hand brushing the piano bench like he's confirming where he is. He tells Michael that when people stop hearing the music, it's usually because the music has stopped protecting the person who made it. The cassette recorder between them remains untouched, a silent witness. Michael shifts forward on the couch, knees angled in, listening hard. Outside the Hollywood Hills house, the night is quiet enough to hear the refrigerator hum. The anchor of the moment is Stevie's voice, steady and unhurried, contrasting with the velocity of Michael's life. The next morning, Michael doesn't sleep in. He's back at Westlake by noon, Studio A booked under a pseudonym. Engineers recall him asking for the room to be stripped down, no extra bodies, no visitors hovering by the glass. He replays a track from the night before, a song still searching for its final shape. He stops it after a chorus and asks a question that lands heavy in the room. "Who's this for?" The assistant looks at the track sheet. No one answers. The question echoes the one he asked Stevie, now relocated to a control room with a mixing board glowing like a city at night. That afternoon, a call comes in from management, routed through a studio phone. Michael doesn't pick it up. He gestures for it to be muted. The object, the phone, becomes another symbol of pressure deferred. According to accounts from people present, he asks the engineer to rewind a single bar, then another. He's not chasing perfection, he's interrogating intention. Stevie's words about noise versus music hover over the session. When Michael finally speaks, it's not about notes, it's about whether the song sounds like him or like the expectations circling him. That evening, Michael returns to the hills. Stevie's house again, same couch, same piano. This time, Stevie has the cassette recorder turned slightly toward himself, still off. He asks Michael what happened at the studio. Michael describes the phone call, the silence, the feeling that every sound he makes is being translated into leverage by someone else. Stevie nods. He says pressure doesn't arrive as force, it arrives as agreement. He warns Michael that the industry's most dangerous trick is convincing artists that control feels like care. The stakes tighten. If Michael accepts that framing, his autonomy erodes without a fight. At rehearsal the next day, the shift becomes visible. Dancers line up on tape marks, mirrors reflecting rows of identical anticipation. Michael walks in late, glove finally on, sequins catching the fluorescent light. He stops the music mid-count. He asks the dancers to step back. He performs the phrase alone, smaller, quieter. Observers note the change, less spectacle, more precision. The glove, now worn, reads differently, not armor, but boundary. It's an anchor detail that signals a recalibration, not retreat. That evening, tabloids publish another speculative item, sourced to insiders, questioning Michael's isolation. The clipping is folded and left on a table near the studio entrance. Michael sees it. He doesn't comment. He asks for Stevie's number again. When he reaches him, he reports the rehearsal, the silence, the feeling of choosing restraint in a system that rewards excess. Stevie responds with a line repeated by multiple accounts. Restraint scares people who profit from overflow. The line lands. The cassette recorder remains off, as if recording would cheapen the exchange. The escalation continues the following morning with a meeting request, urgent, labeled strategy, sent to Michael's team. The location is a conference room near Sunset Boulevard, glass walls, city visible but unreachable. Michael attends briefly, sits, listens. A contract addendum is slid across the table, language dense, clauses tightening visual approvals and tour commitments. He scans it, fingers tracing the margin. The object, the contract, becomes the most explicit representation of the stakes yet. He doesn't sign. He says he needs to think. He leaves before coffee arrives. Back at Stevie's place that afternoon, the mood is different. There's a sense that the perimeter is closing. Stevie tells Michael that moments like this test whether success is a tool or a trap. He asks Michael to describe the first time music felt like refuge. Michael talks about a childhood bedroom, a radio, a melody that made the room feel bigger. Stevie listens, then says the dark turn always comes when refuge becomes performance. He warns that the world will ask Michael to turn his inner life into a product. The warning isn't accusatory, it's precise. As dusk settles, the piano lid is finally closed. Stevie reaches for the cassette recorder and flips it on, not to record, but to check the battery. The click is loud in the quiet room. Michael flinches. Stevie turns it off immediately. He says some conversations are meant to exist only where they happen. The object's brief activation underlines the fragility of the moment. Whatever is about to be said next won't be captured, quoted, or spun. Michael asks one last question before the night deepens. If he changes course, if he resists, what does it cost? Stevie exhales. He says it costs comfort and sometimes applause. He says it might cost friends who prefer the version of you that benefits them. The answer hangs in the air. The title moment is close, now coiled, waiting for the exact sentence that will tilt the night from guidance into something darker.
Michael doesn't respond right away. He stands and walks toward the window, looking out over the Hollywood hills where city lights scatter like a broken constellation. The glove is still on his right hand. He presses that gloved palm lightly against the glass, as if testing a boundary. Then he turns back to Stevie Wonder and asks the question that, according to later accounts, changed the temperature of the room. What if the noise doesn't just follow me? What if it comes for me? The object anchoring the moment is no longer the cassette recorder or the piano. It's the silence after that sentence. Stevie doesn't answer immediately. He tilts his head, listening not to Michael, but to the space around them. When he speaks, his voice is lower. He says that fame doesn't hunt people randomly. It circles those who shine the brightest and waits for exhaustion. He says some stars burn out, some burn through, and some are slowly consumed by the expectations they never learned to refuse. According to people familiar with the conversation, Stevie then tells Michael something unsettling, that the darker turn doesn't begin with enemies, but with the belief that you are alone at the center of your own myth. The stakes crystallize in that sentence. If Michael accepts isolation as destiny, the system wins without resistance. Michael sits back down. He removes the glove and places it on the table, palm up. The gesture is small but deliberate. He asks Stevie if he's ever been afraid of what people wanted from him. Stevie smiles faintly and says fear isn't the problem. Confusion is. He explains that the industry will always blur admiration with ownership. The consequence of misunderstanding that difference, he warns, is losing the ability to tell love from leverage. This is the dark turn of the title, not a threat but a diagnosis, delivered calmly without drama. The next morning, the aftermath begins quietly. Michael returns to Westlake Studios before sunrise. Engineers notice he's lighter in step, but more focused. He asks for the cassette from the previous session and listens once, then sets it aside. He makes a decision that surprises the room. He cuts a section everyone assumed was essential. The anchor detail is the splice itself. Tape lifted, sound removed. It's a concrete consequence of the night before. He's choosing subtraction in a culture addicted to more. Within days, people around him notice changes. Meetings are shorter, requests are filtered, visual concepts are pushed back unless they serve the song. When another contract revision arrives, Michael asks for time instead of rushing compliance. Insiders later say this period marks a subtle shift, not a rebellion, but a tightening of boundaries. The system responds as systems do, with impatience, with rumors, with pressure framed as concern. The noise increases, just as Stevie predicted. Stevie Wonder doesn't speak publicly about the meeting. There's no quote, no anecdote offered to magazines. That absence becomes part of the story. The cassette recorder remains unheard, the conversation unrecorded, yet its effects ripple outward. Michael's performances grow sharper, more controlled. The glove becomes iconic, but its meaning has changed. It's no longer just spectacle. It's a reminder of the night he placed it on a table and confronted what it symbolized. Weeks later, Michael reportedly calls Stevie again, this time from a tour rehearsal space, dancers moving behind him. He thanks him. Stevie responds simply, telling him to keep choosing music over noise, even when the noise pays better. The call is brief. The anchor detail, the phone, now represents connection instead of intrusion. In the longer view, the industry doesn't soften. Scrutiny intensifies. Every choice Michael makes is amplified, misread, commodified. But that meeting in the hills stands as a hinge point, not because it solved anything, but because it clarified the terms. The dark turn wasn't a prophecy of doom. It was a warning about identity under pressure. Michael Jackson flew to meet Stevie Wonder, expecting guidance about art. He received a lesson about survival. The meaning settles in with distance. The story reveals that the most dangerous moments in celebrity culture aren't scandals or collapses, but private conversations where an artist realizes what fame demands in exchange for love. Michael left that house knowing the cost. The tragedy, if there is one, is that knowledge doesn't always equal escape. Sometimes it only sharpens the edges of the cage. The brutal closing truth is this: the night Michael Jackson met Stevie Wonder, the darkness wasn't outside waiting for him. It was already woven into the spotlight, and he was being taught how to see it.